Good morning and welcome to Get on the Bus Readers Advisory. I'm Sarah here at the State Library, and today we're kicking off the second part of our Readers Advisory program. Our first 4 sessions in April covered a variety of tools and trainings and ways to think about Readers Advisory in general and how we interact with our patrons. And now for the next few weeks in May, we're going to give folks throughout Wyoming, library staff throughout Wyoming, a chance to talk about their favorite genres, authors, and all of that good stuff. So we're going to have a bunch of little mini presentations, and they will, of course, still be archived here at getonthebuswyoming.wordpress.com. And just a little bit about how we'll run these presentations, since we have more than one presenter in different areas throughout the state. Today's presentation will be nonfiction for foodies, will be the first one, and then graphic novels for adults will be the second one. And so what we'll do after the first one is we'll give folks out there a minute or two to ask questions or throw in some comments, and then we'll pause for a moment and give our second presenter a chance to get started, go with that, and have some time for questions and comments at the end of that. And then for the purpose of archiving these presentations, instead of doing it in one, as we had the first 4 in April, I'm going to split it up into 2. So at our Get on the Bus website, you'll see we've got nonfiction for foodies. And the first part of today's presentation will be archived here. And then the second presentation will be archived here. Now remember, with all of these pages, we've got some links that the presenters may have mentioned in their presentation or might find helpful for you at a later time, and each one also has homework assignments. Now, if you want to be eligible for a $25 Amazon gift certificate, I hope to see all of you participating in the homework assignments, but for the purposes of these genre presentations, since I've cut them up in kind of doubled the pages, I'm only asking that you participate in half of the genre homework assignments. Again, that will put you eligible for an Amazon gift certificate, and if we have enough folks participating, we may be able to scrounge up a WLA registration for this September's conference, and possibly an Nook e-reader, excuse me. Okay, so with that, we are going to pass it off to Erin at Albany County, who's going to be talking about nonfiction for foodies. And for the purpose of those of you viewing the archived version of this, I just want to apologize to Erin. We did have a technical glitch on the State Library side, and so I missed just the first few seconds of Erin's presentation. So once we get into her video, you really just missed her first 2 or 3 sentences, and it's starting right on her first slide. So my apologies to Erin for that, but for those of you viewing, you really did not miss any content. So we'll go ahead and get started now.
A little bit about historic astronomy, some stuff on the science of cooking, and then I have a variety of media included. So cookbooks. My desert island picks for people who are just starting cooking would be How to Cook Everything by Mark Bittman, and probably The Joy of Cooking, a classic. Those have everything that if you have a patron who doesn't know anything about cooking, basically, and would like to start, those are 2 cookbooks that I would use personally. The Joy of Cooking gets really detailed. How to Cook Everything is a little more basic. He emphasizes a lot of the basics and how to do things quickly, which is nice. When I was a vegetarian and I stopped being a vegetarian, a lot of my friends recommended Ad Hoc at Home for learning how to cook meat by Thomas Keller. He's a pretty famous chef. For baking, I have a professional baker turned librarian friend, and she loves Baking From My Home to Yours by Dora Greenspan, or any of the books by Dora Greenspan, actually. A World of Cake is really interesting. We just got it at the library. It covers cake, as you could imagine, from around the world. And it has fun little charts showing how different cakes derived from each other in different countries. And it has a lot of fun facts about the cakes from around the world. And let's see, it has a chart so that you can kind of determine, based on the chewiness or the fluffiness of the cake, so you can kind of decide based on texture what you might want to bake, things like that. So that's really fun. The Bread Baker's Apprentice is an amazing book. Bread baking is definitely kind of an art. It's pretty precise, and so that's an excellent cookbook. Pie in the Sky is great for people who live at high altitude. It's pretty indispensable, and it talks a lot about the science behind it, behind high altitude baking, which I thought was very interesting. If you have a vegetarian who is looking for cookbooks, the Moose Food cookbooks are always well recommended. And if they are vegan, meaning that they don't consume meat or any dairy or animal byproducts, Veganomicon is really good by Isa Chandra Moskowitz. She has written quite a few cookbooks. And really any of hers would fit the bill, I think. Veganomicon is probably the most comprehensive. Vegan with Inventions is really good too, actually. And finally, this didn't really fit in anywhere else, the Flavor Bible is a great addition because it breaks down all the spices in seemingly the world and will tell you what flavors go well with those spices. So that can be really fun. You'd have, 50 entries for nutmeg or something like that, things that you can pair nutmeg with. It's interesting. So those are there's millions of cookbooks out there. And so these are just probably, if I had to whittle down my collection to just very few, that's probably what I would recommend. Books that feature recipes. These are memoirs mostly, and also have some great recipes in them. The Sweet Life in Paris is really interesting. It's by David Leibovitz. He's a very famous, well-known pastry chef who now lives in Paris. So he writes about the weirdness, the weird little quirks of living in Paris, and it's interspersed with quite a few recipes, mostly sweets, but there are some savory things too. Anything by Ruth Reichel. She's a great writer. She used to be a food critic for, I believe, the New York Times, and has written a few memoirs, Tender at the Bone, Comfort Me with Apples. Garlic and Sapphires is really interesting. She writes about when she went kind of undercover as a food writer. She would go in all these disguises so that restaurateurs wouldn't recognize her, and so that she could try and get equal service. And it's interesting, she comes up with all of these disguises and writes about how unequally she's treated when she's recognized versus when she's dressed up like an elderly woman, for instance. So that's really interesting. Best Food Writing is an anthology edited by Holly Hughes, and that calls from a lot of different resources. And lately they've included recipes. I think it was somehow associated with Gourmet magazine, which went under, and so ever since Gourmet magazine went under a few years ago, they've been including recipes. So. Memoirs. There's been a lot of chefs' memoirs lately. My Life in France is a classic by Julia Child. If you've seen the movie Julie and Julia, it's based on two books, Julie and Julia by Julie Powell and My Life in France by Julia Child. It concentrates on her beginnings when she is kind of just moved to Paris with her husband and is kind of floundering and decides to take a class at Le Cordon Bleu, and it covers then how she and her friends wrote Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And it has nice little details about the food in France, of course, and just living in France. That's the name. Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain is pretty well known, I think, now. He wrote it, he said that he wrote it intending it just to be read by people in the industry, and it made him pretty famous. And it's written with a very sarcastic, tell-all kind of demeanor that he's known for now. It gives a good look at what it's like working behind the scenes in kitchens. It has a lot of details, interesting details for people who might be interested in going into the industry, and a lot of dirt for diners as well. He's become pretty famous since then, and he's on Top Chef, the TV show, as a guest judge sometimes, and he also has his own show on, I think, the Travel Channel called No Reservations that combines his food adventures with travel. So Medium Raw is his newest book. It came out this past winter, and I really like that one. He writes, there's a food porn chapter, which is just describing great meals in great detail. He talks about some of the most amazing meals that he's ever had at really high-end restaurants. And he kind of takes Alice Waters to task for what he views as kind of an elitist attitude toward food. And I'll get a little bit more into that in the food politics section. Blood, Bones, and Butter just came out, and it's incredible. It's by Gabrielle Hamilton. She also has a degree in creative writing, and I think it really shows that the details are amazing. I'm reading it right now. It's definitely the best memoir that I've read to date. And it's great that it's written by a woman, because it's cooking is a very male-dominated industry. So, and she runs a restaurant and everything. So it covers that, but also her life, and really great detail, very artfully done. So, food movements and politics. I think this has become quite an issue lately. There's been a lot of emphasis lately on, organic food, local food, sustainability, autonomous food production, whether it be a garden plot or raising your own animals, things like that. That's really been a big issue, I think, lately. Michael Pollan does this really well. The Omnivore's Dilemma is a fairly well-known book where he traces the origins of 4 different kinds of meals. And he, I think more recently, wrote In Defense of Food, another really interesting book by him. He covers why the modern food industry, why the nutrition industry arose the way it did, with kind of surprising, or maybe not surprising, political implications and influences, and just develops these very simple rules for how to eat. He published more recently a book called something like The Rules of Food, or of Eating, or something. But that basically seems like In Defense of Food made even more compact. So if I had to choose between the two, I'd choose In Defense of Food. It's a little more verbose and detailed. Fast Food Nation is, at this point, kind of a classic. It's very well known. Eric Schlosser uncovers some pretty alarming facts about fast food industry and just food production in general. So that's, a must-have. Animal Vegetable Miracle by Barbara Kingsolver, as you probably know, a fiction writer, turned nonfiction writer in this book. It's very interesting. It was one of the first books to tackle localvorism, eating within a very, usually they choose like a 100-mile radius of your food for environmental impact. So I've heard critiques that it is kind of elitist. A lot of these food movements get that title tacked onto them. So that's interesting. I mean, Barbara Kingsolver is definitely writing from a point of privilege, but it's still a very interesting read. She doesn't negate the fact that she has some very interesting points. Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, another really great fiction writer who wrote this nonfiction book about his kind of struggles with vegetarianism and ethical dilemmas and things like that. Let's see, and then there's a whole body of work on the localvore movement. I didn't include anything on that specifically because I thought that's so geographically specific in Wyoming. It's going to be very different to try and be a localvore versus Southern California. So, but there are definitely books out there, and Animal Vegetable Miracle tackles that, as does the Omnivore's Dilemma. So that's just a tiny bit of the body of work on all the food movements and politics. Historic astronomy. I love historic astronomy. It's the history of food, basically. And one of my favorite blogs, actually, is 4 Pounds Flour. She will reproduce a lot of recipes and from early, mostly American menus, and she'll make these meals and talk about it and talk about the history. The food timeline is great. It goes from the year 0 to the present, and it's set out in a great, easy to read kind of format, so you can kind of scroll down and see when different foods came into being as they are known as food, and there's some cultural information there that's interesting. American Food is great by Evan Jones. It starts with the founding of what we know as the U.S. And covers the food that was grown and how it influenced our culture. It's very interesting. And then I love things like the first American cookbook, A Facsimile of American Cookery, which was supposedly the first written cookbook in 1796 in America. That could have been a stand-in for any number of those little facsimiles that you can get at like history museums. But I think it's very interesting to see the history of America through food. The science of cooking. I'm not a great mind for science, but I do love it when it involves cooking. I love knowing why things work the way they do. So I love What Einstein Told His Cook by Robert Olk, and he has a kind of a sequel out that came out recently. It's great. It's written in little kind of bite-sized chunks, so you can just kind of browse, and it covers things like, why does caramelization occur? Let's see, why does water boil at different temperatures, at different altitudes? Things like that are really fun. Ratio is kind of about the science of cooking and kind of a cookbook itself. It's great for people who want to ad lib with their cooking. It gives, and it's mostly baking, I think. All baking, basically, at its most basic, just relies on ratios of, say, binder to liquids to fats. And so it gives you the ratio for all these different things. If you want to make a brioche, the ratio is XYZ. If you want to make French bread, it is. And then, so then you have that ratio, and then you can kind of toy with it and make up your own recipes based on that. So that would be probably for more advanced bakers, but really fun. Cooking for great geeks, not Greeks, is a great idea. It's like cooking and baking for the Mythbusters crowd. So it has some stuff written by one of the guys who hosts Mythbusters. So it's great. It focuses a lot on why things work the way they do. So it has some crazy ideas a la Mythbusters for baking and cooking, some great new ideas, things to just try out. And it's written in a way that really does cater to people who are more, left-brained, for the computer scientist and scientists in the crowd. I'm Just Here for the Food by Alton Brown, and he has a new version out. I think it's called version 2.0, and he's great. You probably know him from Food Network, and he focuses a lot on science. I always loved his show. He had combined cultural facts, some stuff on historic astronomy, things like that. So it's another great one for like science people. And on food and cooking, the science and lore of the kitchen. This one was just revised and updated recently. And this one is kind of referred to as like the Bible of science cooking. I think it's like 800 pages, so it's definitely more serious than some of the other ones. I think what Einstein told his cook and probably I'm Just Here for the Food are very accessible. On food and cooking is a little more advanced. And movies and magazines. So movies, I love Waitress. It's about, I just love the whole movie. I thought it was a really cute kind of romantic comedy, I guess. And it has a great message, and it'll make you want to bake a pie afterwards, probably, because it's about this woman who's really gifted at baking pie. Eat, Pray, Love has, as you could imagine, a lot of food scenes, and she travels a lot. So from that standpoint, I thought it was really interesting. Kings of Pastry is a great documentary. There's a competition in France every year, and for like the best pastry chefs in the world that are guys, because it's only open to guys. And it covers that competition, and it has, the crazy sugar sculptures and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. It's a documentary. Julie and Julia, I liked the part about Julia Child. I liked half the movie. It does have a lot of great food scenes in it, and it's really popular, so yeah. Babette's Feast is another one that I have not seen, but it comes up a lot in discussions of movies that foodies will like, so maybe check that out too. For magazines, Savoir, I get Savoir and I love it because it has a lot of recipes, but it also focuses on different cultural components. Like one recent issue was on Sicily. So in addition to having a lot of Sicilian recipes, it talked about, the culture of Sicily and things like that. So I happen to love that. Bon Appetit has a lot of great recipes, and is one of the major publications, especially now that Gourmet has folded. Vegetarian Times is great for vegetarians. Cooks Illustrated is pretty well received as well. That's one I have not read, but a lot of my foodie friends have recommended that. And then websites and blogs, which I collect. Michael Pollan, the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, etc., has his site that has a lot of great resources if you want to learn more. And as you see there, it's often about the politics of food production, but not entirely. And it has a lot of links, I think, to kind of empower yourself if you do want to, grow your own food, things like that. If you're looking for restaurant recommendations and recipes, Chowhound is really good. You can search their boards by region. And so if you're traveling, you can get restaurant recommendations. Recipes, there are a million out there. And actually, I didn't include all recipes. All recipes. I like my sites to have reviews. So I like All Recipes or Epicurious for those. These other ones I think do not have reviews, but I trust them because I've made the food from them. That's always been great. Eat, Make, Read is really wonderful with wonderful photography. Mark Bittman, he's a pretty prolific writer. He did until recently have a column in the New York Times, but he still posts a lot of recipes and stuff about food in general. Foodwalker is great. The layout is such that you can look at a bunch of photos and recipes from different websites. And I don't think the recipes are vetted necessarily, but the photography definitely is. So you can kind of go in and hopefully see something that catches your eye. Eat the Cookie, full disclosure, it is a friend of mine who does this, but it's really an amazing blog. She doesn't consume any grain, so it's especially good for gluten-free diets. I've eaten a ton of her food over the years, and it's always been good, and the photography is really good too. David Leibovitz, the aforementioned pastry chef, he has mostly sweets on his website. Lisa Campbell is my professional pastry chef turned librarian friend. So she, her blog is mostly desserts, as you could imagine. And I've also eaten a lot of her food over the years, and it's always been amazing. And I Am Mommy, she is a baker and does beautiful work. So those are kind of the tip of the iceberg. I have tons more if you're interested. Oh, and that's it. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, you can email me or ask later. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. We'll just take a quick moment, and I'll leave you unmuted here. A quick moment if there are any questions or comments before we turn it over to our second presenter. And my apologies to our second presenter, too. We should have put Erin second because I'm sure we're all starving now. So with that, like I said, I will just give folks one moment. If you do not see a chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, you should have three little icons, and the first is a red rectangle with an arrow. You just click that to maximize, and then you'll have a chat box, and I'll get those questions and share them with the group. Or if you have a mic or are calling in through phone and would like to share your question with the group, go ahead and just click that little hand and raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. One question that just came through, Erin, is Bon Appetit still in print?
I believe so. Last I checked, it was. It's Gourmet that has folded, and actually, yeah, they just sent me a thing asking if I wanted to subscribe, so I'm guessing yes. Great, thank you very much. Just give folks another minute here. I was just going to comment too. To thank you very much for sharing the movies and other media, because again, we want to think about all those parts of our collection that when we're thinking about these topics, and certainly with the popularity of Food Network and some other programming over the last 10 years, we might have these TV shows in our DVD collection, or they're on the brain when a patron comes in and is asking about books about food. They might say something like Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations TV show. So again, the way our patrons are taking in information is how they're going to ask us for it. So, and certainly with movie, I love the movie The Waitress too. And you have some of those movies where the food is actually another character in addition to the actors. I just wanted to share two other documentaries that I enjoyed, more in the vein of the food politics, and
I just lost my train. Oh, King Corn, and that's a documentary about corn, as you would imagine, and all of the politics of corn in the U.S. and all of the places that corn shows up, both in food and non-food items in our commerce. And so that was really amazing. Corn is like literally everywhere. So that was a real interesting one. And another one that I enjoyed was called The End of the Line. And these are both from a few years ago. I don't have the exact years. The End of the Line is about the environmental and nutritional impact of our seafood industry and how much, like, speculation on how much seafood is going to be left in the oceans over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. So those were two that I wanted to share with the group. With that, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute Aaron. Thank you again. And we'll get ready for Holly's presentation here, so just give us a moment.